In the winter of 1241, a Mongol army stood at the banks of the Danube River. Vienna, the glittering heart of Central Europe, was just days away. The knights of France, England, and the Holy Roman Empire had no real answer for what was coming. City after city had already been burned to ash. Poland, Hungary, Russia, all crushed in a matter of weeks. And then nothing. A messenger arrived from the east. The great Khan Ögedei was dead. The generals packed up and rode home to decide who would rule the empire next. Europe had no idea how lucky it just got. But what if that messenger never came? What if Ögedei lived and the Mongols kept riding west? The army that should not have existed. To understand what a full Mongol conquest means, you first have to understand what the Mongols actually were, because nothing in history compares to them. At its greatest extent, the Mongol Empire was the largest empire the world has ever known, twice the size of the Roman Empire and twice the size of everything Alexander the Great ever conquered. And it was built not by a nation-state with centuries of infrastructure, but by nomadic horsemen from the steppes of Central Asia, united by a single terrifying genius. The Mongols didn't just win battles. They rewrote the rules of warfare. Psychological terror was a strategy. Cities that surrendered were spared. Cities that resisted were erased, not weakened, not occupied, erased. The population made an example of. The buildings reduced to rubble. The message sent to the next city on the list. When the Mongols sacked Baghdad in 1258, they obliterated libraries and cultural treasures that took centuries to build, effectively ending the Islamic Golden Age in a single week. Now imagine that machine pointing itself at Paris, at London, at Rome, the conquest. In our alternate timeline, Ögedei Khan survives. The Mongol generals do not retreat. They cross the Danube. Vienna falls first. The famous walls mean nothing against an army that leveled the fortifications of China and Persia. Then Germany, the fractured princes of the Holy Roman Empire, who can barely cooperate in peacetime, stand no chance against a unified Mongol command that has been running coordinated multi-front campaigns for 3 decades. France is next. The terrain is harder forests, rivers, fortified castles. Historians argue the Mongols would have slowed in Western Europe's difficult terrain, where fortress warfare mattered more than open cavalry charges. True, but slowed is not stopped. The Mongols adapted everywhere they went. They hired Chinese engineers to siege Beijing. They would hire European engineers to siege Paris. Within a generation, the Atlantic coastline is Mongol territory. What Europe looks like under the Khan. Here's where it gets complicated because the Mongols were not simply destroyers. They were the most brutal conquerors in history, yes. But once the conquest was done, they were surprisingly pragmatic rulers. The Mongols were strong supporters of free trade. They lowered tolls and taxes, protected caravans by guarding roads against bandits, and promoted trade between East and West. The Silk Road, dangerous to travel for centuries due to warring kingdoms, fell completely under Mongol control. The resulting stability opened up an era of largely undisturbed exchange of goods, stretching from Europe all the way to East Asia. So here is the paradox. A Mongol-conquered Europe might have been devastated in the short term, millions dead, cities burned, the Catholic Church dismantled. But in the long term, it might have become the richest, most connected civilization on Earth. Chinese gunpowder, paper, and printing technology would flow directly into European hands, not in the 15th century, but in the 13th. The Renaissance might have happened 200 years early, not in Florence, but in a Mongol-administered trading capital somewhere on the Rhine. what gets lost forever. But let's not sanitize this. The death toll of Mongol conquest across Asia is estimated in the tens of millions. Entire cities that existed for 1,000 years gone. Irrigation systems that fed millions destroyed and never rebuilt. Some historians estimate Mongol conquests reduced the population of Persia from 2.5 million to just 250,000. Apply that scale to Europe and the numbers become almost incomprehensible. The great cathedrals of France, Notre Dame, Chartres, Reims, would not survive. The universities of Oxford and Paris, barely a generation old in 1241, would be ashes. The Catholic Church, the single institution that gave medieval Europe its cultural identity, would be shattered, possibly forever. And without the Church, there is no Reformation. Without the Reformation, there is no Protestant work ethic, no Dutch Republic, no foundation for modern democracy as we know it. The world today. Fast forward to the 21st century in this alternate timeline. What do you see? Probably a world dominated by a single Eurasian superstate, a civilization stretching from Korea to Ireland, where the descendants of Mongol administrators rule over a blended culture that is neither fully Eastern nor fully Western. A world with extraordinary trade networks and technological sophistication, but with very different ideas about individual freedom, national identity, and human rights. America might not exist at all. The European powers that colonized the Americas, Spain, Portugal, Britain, France, may never have developed the independent strength to cross the Atlantic. The Americas remain untouched, or reached centuries later by a completely different kind of explorer. The verdict. Genghis Khan's armies were the most destructive force in human history. A complete conquest of Europe would have killed millions, erased centuries of culture, and rewritten every border on the map. But history is never simple. From that rubble might have grown the most connected civilization Earth has ever seen. A world without the nation-state rivalries that caused both world wars, with trade routes linking Beijing to London for 700 uninterrupted years. Sometimes the most terrifying what-if is the one that doesn't have a clean answer. Was a Mongol Europe humanity's greatest catastrophe? Or in some dark, twisted, alternate reality its greatest unifier? Drop your answer in the comments. And if this made you think you know what to do,